Hey everyone, so today we're going to be discussing this book. It is called Gordon Parks, How the Photographer Captured Black and White America. I have an ebook of this one because I went onto Amazon and Waterstones and a bunch of other bookshops around here, and they didn't seem to have it in stock. And also Amazon is not a great company, so do not buy your books from there. But yeah, so I have an ebook of this, so I'll be just using this to show you the illustrations and explaining the story. So before I get into the actual book, I'll just explain Gordon Parks and what his work was like. So he was a Black American photographer from Kansas who was active from the 40s to the early 2000s. He spent a chunk of his time working for the government in Washington, D.C. as a photographer in the Office of War and Information. And part of his job was to use his camera to expose the social and economic state of people living in America at the time. So he decided to use his position to take pictures of Black families around D.C. who were subjected to poverty and racism. Eventually, Parks's work was recognized by really big magazines like Vogue and Life magazine. And when he worked for them, he had a chance to take pictures of activists like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and Stokely Carmichael. If you're not familiar with their work, you can check out the links that I've included below. And today, if you visit DC and you go to the Smithsonian's or the art galleries, you can find Gordon Parks's photographs there. And you can also find them preserved in the Library of Congress. Getting into the actual book now, we'll just start with the cover and the author. So this book was written by Carole Weatherford. She's an African-American historian, writer, and poet who's written a whole bunch of children's books, as well as some books on the history of Black life in America. So I've included a link to her work below if you'd like to check that out, if you really like this book. And yeah, I've also included a link to the illustrator, Jamie Kristoff. He does a bunch of children's books, so definitely check out his work. And I really, really love his drawings and his style, so definitely give his work some love. So the story starts by talking about Parks's family, and we learn that he was the youngest of 15 siblings, and we learn how he was named after the doctor that saved his life. And in the first few pages, we see a drawing of him and his mom, and we see him going off to school. And then we get to the first scene that I really want to discuss, where he's in school, and we see that he has a white teacher. And in the little blurb here, it says that his white teacher tells her all-Black class, "You'll all wind up porters and waiters." And then it says, "What did she know?" So yeah, I just kind of want to talk about this scene in the book. I don't know if you can, oh no, okay. You can just see it there, and you can see the white teacher and him. And yeah, I just really found this scene powerful because I've never really encountered a children's book where they talk about racism in the classroom and how much impact a teacher can have on a child's future and the career that they choose. So yeah, I think it's really important for us to address these issues in children's books and recognize that these things happen in the classroom and that children should not be subjected to that kind of discrimination in a place where they're supposed to feel safe. So yeah, I really like that this was included in the story. And yeah, moving forward, we see that Gordon loses his mother when he's still a child, and he ends up working a few odd jobs as a busboy, a piano player, and even as a waiter. And we can see here in the illustrations that he's doing these. And then we get to the next kind of like big plot point where he is in his mid-20s and he's just read a magazine about migrant workers, and it's inspired him to buy a camera. So he saves up some money and buys a used camera, and you can see here a little illustration of the camera. And then a chunk of the novel is or a chunk of the book, is spent talking about his job. So we see here he's exploring some of the Black families that live in and around Washington, D.C. And it says here, he can see that Blacks have it harder than whites. And I really love that this line was included in the story, because I don't think I've ever seen a children's book so clearly address racism. It fully just says Blacks have it harder than whites, and it's a fact. And I just love that it was included in this, because not very many books will explicitly name racism and say that, yes, this is America, this is what happens in America. And I just think it's very, very powerful. The next big point in the story is a focus on Gordon's most famous portrait, which is called American Gothic, Washington, D.C. And it was inspired by the Grant Wood painting called American Gothic, with the woman and the man holding the pitchfork. And we can see here in the book that there's a little illustration of Ella Watson, who was a cleaning lady that he encountered in DC, and he got to know her, and he ended up taking a portrait of her standing in front of the American flag holding a broom and a mop. I really love this scene in the story because it kind of brings together all of the different themes in the book. It brings together like photography, communications, patriotism, and working class families, segregation. It kind of sheds light on how Gordon was able to take his craft and make it political and shed light on the realities of working class America in DC. And yeah, so this is the actual portrait. I think here you can see it there. I just kind of retrieved this off of Google Images, but I've included a link if you want to take a closer look at it. And yeah, it's essentially Ella Watson with her mop and broom in front of the American flag, and it is such a powerful image of Black America and racism. And there's just so much is communicated in a photograph, and I think it's given me, just reading a children's book has given me a whole new approach to photography. Now that we've discussed the content of the book, I want to talk a bit about why this book is significant and why I chose to review it and share it with you all and encourage you to buy it for your kids. Obviously, the big theme in the book is segregation and anti-Black racism, and I think that those are two very, very important topics that kids should learn about early on and be allowed to ask questions about and, learn the right history. So that was part of why I chose this book. And, it just kind of takes a social issue that's very, very complex and turns it into a book for kids from, I think it's targeted at kids who are between 5 and 8. So yeah, definitely it's a great introduction to a conversation about race with your kids. And another aspect of the book that I really like is in one of the pages where it discusses where he buys the camera. It talks about where he finds his inspiration. So he reads a magazine and is inspired. And in another part of the book, there's different monuments about the government. The Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the White House are mentioned. And I just think that mentions of these aspects of society and these institutions is really important, so kids can get familiar with how these institutions play a role in racism and how things like magazines and journalism are very helpful for creatives. I think that, it just kind of gets kids interested in those fields and makes them want to, make those fields better and be creative. So and then another thing that I really love about Gordon Parks is that he wasn't trained as a photographer in any way. He didn't go to school for it. He just kind of wanted to make a difference, and he wanted his work to expose an injustice in the world. And I think that makes him an excellent activist and someone that kids need to familiarize themselves with, because yeah, it just kind of shows that people of color and Black people can make a difference, and they can be in creative fields and still be political and still have a say in politics and be part of the movement against racism. So yeah, overall, this book is a great intro to racism, especially anti-Black racism, and the history of Black and white America that kids should actually be being taught in schools. So that was my review of Gordon Parks, How the Photographer Captured Black and White America. I hope that this was helpful, and if you want to learn more about Gordon Parks and his work, or if you want to look into his music or his other writings or his films, you can check out the Gordon Parks Foundation. I've included their website here, so definitely give it a browse. And yeah, I've also included some of the news articles that I looked at to do research for this video, and if you want to read some more stuff, I'll include those down below as well. And yeah, make sure you check out his photography and his books and learn about his life, because I think that he's a very inspirational figure and someone that all children should be taught about. And next time I'll be talking about another book, also a children's book. It's one that I used to love as a kid, so I'm really excited about that. So stay tuned. Leave some comments on what you think of this book, if you read it, if you want to read it, if you'll be buying it for your kids, or for yourself, because I am a 23-year-old sitting here reading children's books. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.